Hi, Amar. How are you doing? Thank you so much for taking out the time for this podcast that I do. Entrepreneurship is very close to me. It's something that I've been a part of for the last 24, 25 years now.
Well, thank you, Gaurav. Thank you for having me here. It's really looking forward to this conversation. It's an honor to have this conversation with someone like you who brings so much of experience and so much of depth from the industry. So really looking forward.
I appreciate you're kind. You're kind with your words. So, Amar, just before we start and we deep dive into the accessibility, which I personally am now a part of in the industry as well, as you would have known, I'm a co-founder in this company called Accessify Labs, being held by some really, really good people in the team. And we are doing some great progress. But I wasn't aware of this industry maybe till about a few years back. When I got to know the purpose that it solves and how important it is in our landscape today, I had to really do something in this, and I'm so glad that we are doing some great progress. You've been tied with this industry for so long, and I would love for you to introduce yourself, talk a little about to the audience, and really talk about the space as well. So over to you.
Sure. As you already know my name, I'm Amar Jain. I'm professionally a corporate lawyer and I'm also an accessibility professional. I did my law from Mumbai, worked with law firms, and currently I run my own law firm as well as an NGO which is dedicated to providing legal aid to people with disabilities as well as solving accessibility as a systemic challenge. So that's a bit about me.
And I think the follow-up question was that why accessibility? How did you hear about this? Why did you get into it? What is the story behind that?
Sure. For me, accessibility happened very organically because, as I said, I was born blind and I was growing up in my childhood days. And access to educational material used to be a huge challenge because there were no accessible formats of the reading material. And despite the fact that I wanted to study well, it was a lot of hindrance on my way. So my dad had to actually audio record the cassettes to begin with. Then he had to scan and edit the books so that I could read it when I was doing my law college studies. And then slowly, when I came in contact with digitization, whether it is internet banking, whether it is your electronic data rooms for researching case laws, whether it is virtual data rooms for conducting client due diligence. At multiple, instances, I had to face huge accessibility barriers from not being able to access the platform itself or from not being able to access the data that the client has shared for me to be able to perform due diligence on it, and consequently it impacted my performance. So there came a time in my career when I joined my first job, and I remember it was my first year of completion, and I had to file my own ITR. Despite being in the 30% tax slab back then, I was not able to file my ITR independently, and that really irked me. That while I'm able to earn my own income, but I'm not able to look at what my CA is putting in for me or to be able to file it independently myself. So until then, what was happening is I was writing to businesses and companies to make things accessible, but they were listening to me as a lawyer because I was coming with that background. But often I was confronted with developers who would tell me the other side of the story, where they will say that this can't be done or this will require significant revamp of our existing infrastructure, or this is something that is technologically not possible today. So I kind of thought to myself that whether accessibility is so difficult, whether it can't be done today. That's how I got into this space. I learned the technicalities associated with accessibility. I learned coding languages. I learned accessibility as a domain. And then I kind of spoke with businesses in their language and spoke with developers in their languages. So I remember when this whole ITR thing happened, I worked once the income tax department itself was convinced that they needed to do something about it, and the vendor was kind of saying that it can't be done in the current scenario. I worked to develop a prototype to show how it can be done, and then this is where my starting point of accessibility was.
No, that's fantastic. And from there to today, it's been a long road and a big journey. Where do you think the world with accessibility is today in India and versus maybe in the West? So how would you make that comparison from where you had started, where you could not file your own ID?
Right. So, Gaurav, I think in last 10 years or so, the demand for accessibility has significantly increased. The demand from the users, the demand from the organizations, because they want to cater to every segment that the business can touch the life of. Right? So the demand for accessibility within India has significantly increased. There has been a lot of support from the government, from the business ecosystem, from the judicial side, to make sure that no one is left behind, as we call it, right? When it comes to usage and accessing of products and services is concerned. If you compare it with the West, Gaurav, the difficulty is that in India right now the focus from a business perspective is that if there is a feature that we want to roll out, the developers are really sitting to roll it out by hook or crook. So nobody focuses on good practices of semantic coding or involving all your use cases as part of your user research journeys, so that when the design happens, it is inclusive of the fact that there are people with disabilities, or there are some people who may need accessibility who may not be persons with disabilities, but due to age factor, due to other factors, they may need accessibility, right? So that, I think, the comprehensiveness, I think, is we are still missing, in addition to good develop kind of habits of developing good semantics or thinking from accessibility from that lens. That, I think, in West is better, because often people follow standard practices which are part of the curriculum. So here, I think that piece is also missing.
Got it. And from my own experience, now that I am also playing a whatever small part in this world of accessibility, with my humble experience, what I've seen is that there is a lot of focus which is also being put by the government, by businesses, which was never the case before. So I think you're absolutely right that there is a positive demand, and there is a positive work which is being done in the space as well. And there are a lot of forums today which kind of talk about this whole accessibility play. Now, Amar,
Yes.
when we talk about accessibility, let's dumb it down completely. Why don't you tell the audience what does accessibility is means, and is it only for the people who cannot see, or is it for more disabilities? What is included in that? So just like the basics of it all, please.
The very basic of accessibility, if you look at it, if you just break the term itself down, access and ability. So the concept of designing is, and when you talk of principles of universal design, is that irrespective of your abilities, you should be able to use the product or a service or an environment that I am designing, right? So as creators, we can't predict beyond a certain level the kind of users who are going to who are going to use our product or a service, or we can't beyond prescribing minimum thresholds for, say, compatibility, etc. We are not in a situation to predict in what circumstances or in what conditions my product or a service is going to be used, or by what type of users. It could be language diversity, it could be disability, it could be age factor, and it could be whole different scenarios. From that perspective, ensuring that I design in a way that it's most optimum to be used in as many scenarios as possible is really making something accessible. So if I break it down again, if I'm communicating information that can be perceived only by one sense out of five, let's say only conveying information through color alone, say red color to convey a danger zone, or green color to convey a go ahead zone, that then becomes a problem, because then I'm excluding those who are not able to perceive colors.
Hmm.
Similarly, if I only create something which can be only clicked through mouse, then I'm excluding users who are not able to use mouse but rely on keyboard, or rely on speech, or rely on multiple other modes of inputs. If I'm creating information that can only be understood by a certain segment and not by all, by making the information more complicated, then I'm excluding users who may have language diversity, who may have a limited literature understanding, for them to be not able to perceive the information or understand the information that I've created. So looking at accessibility from that lens is really what accessibility means.
No, great, great. Thanks for defining that. I mean, we take it for granted, but many people didn't know about this, right? Like I did not for many years myself, even though I was a part of the tech and the services domain. So I think another question, and this is real, right? I mean, I can experience it as a business owner. When we are making an application, you want to really understand whether there is a total addressable market for it or not,
Hmm, hmm.
and sometimes knowingly or unknowingly we ignore the accessibility part, because we just, I mean, at least it's thought that it makes the product more expensive, or you need to add a lot of technicalities to that, which now I understand it's not true, because when you are thinking about it from that the accessibility lens, a lot of things can be done while you are making that application or doing digitization, which can be done with very small changes and made accessible. Talk to me about this. Like, there is this whole thing about it's a lot of work, it costs a lot, and there is no market for it versus what the reality is. So over to you for that.
Very interesting question. So, when I'll just give you some examples. When Google Maps designed its Maps application and when they first rolled out the turn by turn voice guided navigation feature, where the driving directions are also spoken out loud. Initially, it was initially designed for helping people with blindness to move in their surroundings. When SMS was designed for the first time, it was designed to help people with speech and hearing difficulties to communicate on text. And there are multiple examples of such usage and patterns where something which was created to solve a limited set of audience as a problem solution is being today used by massive crowd that we did not envision it to happen. Today we can't imagine taking our vehicles out without Google Maps voice guided features being on, right? So that's one angle, that accessibility is not just for people with disabilities. It can benefit everybody provided that your design meets those requirements. That's one. Second, as you rightly pointed out, if you it's a very simple logic. If you're creating something which is designed or baked with accessibility, the cost of creation is going to be very less. Versus if you're going to retrofit something which is already created to make it accessible, obviously the cost of going to make it retrofittation is going to be higher, right? So, which is why it is always said that you design something from the beginning which is accessible. Hence, the cost really comes down. Now, talking about total addressable market, worldwide, the number of people with disabilities alone is 1.4 billion, which is 16% of the world population as per WHO. If you look at the spending power as per 2020/2019 estimates of ILO, sorry, not ILO, my bad, as per 2018/2019 estimates of US Labor Department, the purchasing power of people with disabilities is around 8 trillion. Now, if you look at it, India alone, although we are yet to have official census figures for 27, etc., estimated people with visual impairment alone are going to be 75 million is what is estimated. And again, people say it's a gross underestimation of what the population could look like. I'll give you another example. If you look at glassware industry, until 13th century, nobody thought that glassware will also come up as an industry. And until 18th century, when somebody thought that lets me create something from a rock which looks like a glass and solves this problem. Today, it is a 150 billion dollar industry of glassware alone, which was initially created to help with visual difficulties. And today it has crossed many those hurdles and become even fashion statement, like goggles, etc., have become a fashion statement, right? So from that perspective, there is huge potential to grow accessible solutions which can be consumed by people with disabilities and without disabilities.
And that's very well said, and when I was getting into the space, one thing that I figured, that yes, it's a great cause, but there is a lot of opportunity here as well. And more and more businesses think about it for the cause and for what is there to be made in this domain. I think it will only make lives better for all the sides of the people, right? So that's how I look at it.
In fact, Gaurav, the way we pitch it to businesses is that there is a economy of persons with disabilities called as purple economy,
Hmm.
and one of the taglines or the purpose of the purple economy is that creating profit with a sense of purpose. So, as you rightly pointed out, that there is a purpose to it, that you want to solve for a larger piece of population, including people with disabilities, but you are also looking at the profitability side of it.
And why not? There is no reason not to.
Absolutely,
Absolutely,
absolutely.
very interesting. So let's talk about this whole purple economy you're talking about, or the whole TAM that you kind of mentioned, and thanks for sharing that data that you shared about how big the industry or how big the market is. So for people who are looking into making an impact, and they want to still run a profitable business from this, where is the opportunity today, Amar? Like, what are the 3 5 segments that you suggest people should be looking into?
Well, first and foremost, I think is to create your users database when you're doing any prototyping, when you're doing any market study, when you're doing any designing. Making sure that you include users with disabilities or users with varying abilities. By one action, you're going to get the insights for making sure that your product or service works for everybody. And as you expand your reach to a wider set of audience, you're automatically going to get more ROI. That's the first thing.
Hmm.
Second is being very adaptable and being receptive to the feedback. So as you roll out something, if there is a feedback which is coming which says that this is a blocker that needs to be addressed, if you are as a brand show that receptivity to take that feedback constructively and address this in a meaningful way in a limited time frame, I think that also increases your brand reputation and increases your brand loyalty from customers.
Very interesting. So not just a direct, it has a huge indirect impact on the business as well.
Absolutely. Third, I would say is that looking at what innovative accessibility can also lead to a lot of innovation. I'll just give you one example. We were working with a food delivery app, and we said that for people who are speech and hearing impaired, the direct call feature by the delivery partner does not work. So they need a facility where the delivery partner does not call you. Instead, they're able to do a text chat. Now, we of course thought that this will help a segment of a person with disability. Little that we knew that it would also help mothers or fathers of newborns who may not want to disturb their newborn and yet receive a parcel just by using text chat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Many different use cases get solved by this, right? Yeah, absolutely.
So, applying your solutions to different use cases is
Hmm.
another third insight that I thought would be worth sharing.
No, absolutely. While digital accessibility is what we are discussing till now, there's a whole space of physical accessibility as well, which cannot be
Right.
ignored, right? And I think there are a lot of measures being taken worldwide for physical accessibility. And I think the both are kind of coming together in some kind of a sense as well.
Yes, I would say the need for physical accessibility was felt more when you had aging population, more than people with disabilities, right? The need for ramps because you have senior citizens living in the buildings around you. You have people who want to access public spaces but use crutches, use wheelchairs. The physical atmosphere, the audio in the lift, for example, is generally known to benefit people with blindness. The innovations like ramps also help people carry heavyweight luggages from shopping malls or mothers who have a baby on strollers, right? So from that perspective, the need for physical accessibility evolved from that perspective. And today, digital accessibility, I would say that barring of course hardware related in innovations, the software side is very low hanging fruit to achieve. On
Hmm.
physical environment side, you may have a challenge if you have an existing infrastructure, but if you're building something new, then making that accessible is not at all difficult.
Yeah. And again, goes back to the same thing, right? If we have the mindset and if we build to include, and if we can have that, being taken care of while at the start of ideation or creation, it is not too much of a cost or implication that is. But we need to
Absolutely.
have that mindset. Okay. Getting into Amar, the side of, is this only to do by choice, or is there are legal compliances, legal responsibility that the government also put in, and worldwide, how does that kind of legal compliance differ from one country to another? What does that landscape look like?
If I may say, majority of the developed countries have very strong mandates on making something accessible. And in fact, for example, US, etc., US, UK, European Union, Australia, Canada, are some of the jurisdictions where if your product or a service is not accessible, it may even impact your procurement by third parties or even government for that matter. For example, in US, there's a specific mandate that if the government has to procure something and if there is a choice between accessible and inaccessible solution, the government is duty bound to procure something which is accessible. So you're also losing out from that side. That's one. As far as India is concerned, India has also had a very strong mandate on making things accessible, both products and services, as well as environment, from 2016. So today, all service providers, whether government or private, are required to ensure that their products and services comply with accessibility. And non-compliance, of course, has its own penal plus reputational consequences.
Absolutely. How, while of course there are laws which are done, but how are they implemented? Are there consequences of it? And, are there authorities where people can go and talk about, or complain about this? And there are complication or consequences that happen from those complaints.
Certainly. So, in Indian context, for example, you have Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act that talks about accessibility and that talks about non-compliances and things like that. So, if your product and service today is not accessible, then one, of course, it's a reputational damage because the person is going to do social media outreach or is going to file a case for inaccessibility. So that immediate reputational loss is a big loss. Second is there are chief commissioner for persons with disabilities and state commissioner for persons with disabilities that are set up under the law to monitor that provisions of the law are complied by everybody. If you don't comply, then there are financial penal consequences for non-compliance. Maximum penalty can currently be up to 5 lakhs. But imagine if the penalty is imposed on a continuing basis for per day of a default. It can run into huge lakhs and crores. Then you have courts, the typical constitutional courts like High Courts and Supreme Court, where one can go for violation of fundamental rights. And in 2025, pursuant to a judgment called Amar Jain versus Union of India, it has been held that right to digital accessibility is part of fundamental rights by the Supreme Court. So one can very well go and say that by not making something accessible, you're also violating my fundamental rights, which may have severe consequences, including courts may even direct you to shut down your services till the time you don't make it accessible. So while these are all things yet to be tested in the market, but these are practically possible.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think those are some of the pointers that I wanted to talk about, Amar. If I may have missed anything that you want to share to the audience, please go ahead.
I think I would only say that very often we see accessibility is only benefiting a limited set of audience. That's one. And second, we have a lot of assumptions about people with disabilities. So, for example, about people with blindness, people will feel, oh, these people always need voice based solution. But that's not true. We equally rely on e-text, we equally rely on other forms of media that everybody else uses. So making sure that we interact with our user base before making any assumptions
Hmm.
or before thinking that we should head in a specific direction is a very good practice to adopt.
No, fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Usually I try not to talk about any of my business on my podcast, but here, as you rightly said, this is a business with a purpose. So I will absolutely say that, anybody out there who wants to look at accessibility more or even get into the understanding and delivering of it, we are happy to provide that at Accessify Labs. And Amar, thank you so much. What is the best way for the audience to get in touch with you?
Absolutely simple. If you can remember my name, which is Amar Jain, you can drop me an email on amarjain@amarjain.com.
Wow, that's actually simple. All right, thank you, Amar. Really appreciate it. Wishing you the best. You're doing some great work. We are extremely proud of you in this domain of accessibility that we have, and we really looking forward to supporting you in any way and every way to take this forward. Thank you so much.